Scarborough, and leader Richard Petty's in trouble. Head for the wall. Hits the fence, crashes. Scarborough goes by. Baker goes by. Chuck bounds, spins, and Waltrip crashes into him. Richard Petty, in a surprise, has trouble. Crashes into the outside fence. We hope he's okay. He took a solid hit.
All right, welcome back down to the Chiefs Pit with the Petty brothers, Timmy Petty, Mark Petty, and Richie Petty. We're going to discuss with you today some different innovations through racing. NASCAR, this is the 75th season for NASCAR racing, and we were talking and thinking how much cars have changed and stuff, but the innovations, just the little things. People are always trying to get a little better, and it doesn't take a big invention sometimes, but little things, and over the years they've been just adding to it, and it makes it better and better. And one thing which you was talking about was these return springs.
Yeah, early on they had some. They were very low grade steel, and they had broke a few of them. And over the years they come up, and this is actually called a Petty spring.
Right.
That Dale and Daddy and I think Uncle Richard all got involved and figured out that there was some place that made them, and this is to their specs, and they've been selling these for probably 40 or 50 years.
Well, Daddy was always really big, especially when we was racing, on the return springs and stuff, making sure you had clearance with air cleaners, because he was always afraid of stuck throttles.
Okay, and now that you mentioned that, I mean, not to diminish the springs, but you know, we've all been involved with breaking these shafts, and now they will allow you to put a better metal shaft in them. And remember, when they were going past center, it would actually lock to wide open throttle. So they actually come up with a secondary stop, and I don't see one on here, but well, there is one over here. I want to turn it around. That's one of the versions, and our buddy Zippo, Darryl Brewer, he made a deal that bolted on here on the other side that would actually be a throttle stop. And I don't have one here. We'll put one in here for the pictures, but it would actually go back and hit that, and that would keep it from rotating past center.
Mm-hmm. So, but obviously these days that's on the Xfinity car.
Well, and they have them even on the throttle bodies on the fuel injection. There's throttle stops to keep the.
They still use the same stuff.
It's pretty close, and there's different versions.
Well, I
had
remember,
one that bolted on back here. Remember Clyde Vickers come up?
I remember anytime getting ready to go to Daytona or something like that, coming up with new air cleaners, and Daddy you'd have to shut the hood and get under there and check it. Go full throttle.
Feel right here for the.
He would spend hours just making sure, because I guess Richard and Lee had some stuck throttles at times, but that was a big thing about him. He took that extra care. Once you put that engine in there, he would go around that air cleaner and take them off. Just remember how he just beat them air cleaners and stuff?
Because a lot of times the thing would flex,
right?
Even in the car,
yeah.
Right.
And then you had to have X amount of clearance, because you got. There's a lot going on there, so yeah, they paid very close attention to that for sure.
Yes.
So,
and again, the whole evolution of anything in racing, whether it was NASCAR, the Petties, Junior Johnson,
all of them,
the Wood Brothers, all the innovations is what's, as we've talked about the truck episode and different things. That's what's brought it from 1949 to 2023. This is the evolution.
Well, if you remember, like in '54. When Lee actually finished second in that race, but then he ended up winning it because they had messed or soldered on one of these. I don't think it was the same kind of carburetor, but it was on that Ford of Tim Flock. Yeah, but
I think he had a wrong camshaft in there too.
Well, it could have been, but just the different things that they allow you to do now that took it past the strictly stock.
Right, but it was for safety.
Right.
We did a whole.
We're leading into the safety deal.
One of our earlier episodes for the Petty brothers here, we did an episode on helmets and things. But one thing we didn't get into was, the safety increased with just the helmets itself. But through the years, drivers and stuff would come up with these straps and stuff for their necks, and they would clip them on there because as you run, your neck gets tired and it lays over. So they put them straps on to keep the head from turning over. But what they didn't realize, that was really an early forerunner of the Hans device, because it would kind of keep your necks. And Richard at times, and especially back in I guess it was 80 at Pocono when he had that really bad wreck.
Uh-huh.
He was running 2 of these things, so I think that saved his life because he broke his neck. Remember?
Right.
But they didn't. Nobody knew this at the time. But he had 2 of these straps, and that probably saved a man's life.
It kept it from stretching.
And so now they require everybody to wear the Hans, but at that time you didn't have to wear it, but they was wearing these straps. And I think it got into the 90s. These drivers come up with these new headrests and things, and they got rid of the straps, and that's when some disasters happened. But
Yeah.
but the Hans now, that keeps everything tied in
Well, they
just
had
like
that,
that.
Hutchins?
Hutchins
Yeah,
device.
that was
Yeah.
the same thing.
It was similar,
Bobby
but
Hutchins.
those straps were just a forerunner to the restraint
It was
system.
all just to keep you.
was restraint system.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was just a little bitty
Well, if you go
thing
back,
here, and you strapped it on here, and it went under your arm.
even as early as the 50s, Lee had that one lap belt that was
Yeah.
bolted back here to the frame, and then it turned into 5,
Yeah,
6,
yeah.
and 4-point harnesses. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a funny one on
Fighter
that.
pilot.
I'll tell you a funny one on that helmet strap. We were running down there at Caraway. We was running like a 200 lap race, and I had one of them straps on. And for some reason, I don't know if it just got tangled up or whatever, but it cut the dang circulation off my arm, and my arm went numb. I'm telling you, it hurt. I'm sitting there running about halfway, so we run long enough. We had a pit stop in that race. Anyway, I come into pits, and I'm on the radio. I said, "Man, I can't feel my arm. I can't feel my arm." Well, my father-in-law, Rick McPherson, he was helping us. First thing he did, because Mark was changing tires and other guys, Rick gets over there with a knife and cuts that
Yep.
strap off, and boy, it was like a brand new arm on me. I come
Oh,
back to
okay.
life. It was so that was
Blood got flowing
Yeah,
again.
yeah. So I had a tourniquet on. I just didn't realize it.
Holy smokes!
But yeah, that was kind of a dangerous move that night. But you know, through the years, the Petties and like you was talking about, every race team is always trying to make it safer for the drivers because they lost a lot of guys early on. And, you know, that goes into the interliners on the good years. There was several guys got killed.
Well, and even not losing people, just like you have a wreck, and when you look at it, it's
Right.
like, okay, what can we do to make this better?
Analyze what went on.
Yeah.
But it goes back to '61 when grandfather wrecked at Daytona. They'd put a new bar in at his leg, and he blamed that bar for his entire life, the rest of his life. He said that's what broke his leg, but it probably saved his life.
Yeah.
Probably was, yeah.
All right. So how we started talking about all this is the window nets. So let's go back.
Well, we've discussed the window nets with a few episodes here, but it keeps coming up. People trying to figure out where the window net came from.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of clarify that today, if we can. I
To
don't know
the
if
best of our knowledge, so the King had wrecked in 1970. He had wrecked both his Superbirds at Darlington, and they took the short track car, which was the Roadrunner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Plymouth Roadrunner. But he actually flipped that in a race.
Didn't he wreck the Superbird earlier in the week in practice? He
Yes.
wiped it out.
Yes. Or maybe it was just one.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Because
But
he
they had
was
to-
running 2 cars, and he had P.
So
Hamilton.
they did have to
and-
roll that car in there, and he was running pretty decent in the race in that car. But if you'll see all the pictures that we're probably going to put or the footage, you know, his arm was hanging out, and it was a pretty catastrophic wreck.
Well, at this time, the driver's window was wide open. They
Yeah.
didn't have anything. So, because a lot of them didn't even have radios at the time, so they would use hand signals, and that's what they would put their hands out there, and they was going to pit or something. They'd tap the top of the car, or they'd tap the sides. So they didn't know any better, I guess. But
So that wreck's probably been discussed 400
well,
times.
he come off the 4 and hit the wall, and the car just went
Barrel
tumbling,
rolled.
and he comes flying out of the car, and you can see his arm coming out. I guess he dislocated his shoulder, which he's lucky he didn't cut the whole thing off.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We hit the outside wall and then come down and hit the
Right,
inside wall.
right, and
Which most everybody's seen that video.
So very soon after that event, that crash, our dad and our grandmother, they were.
we got to remember, Daddy was very protective of his brother, and you can see it in these videos.
Oh, yeah.
He's running over there trying to get him and not kicking that guy. You'll see the fire extinguisher should go off.
Yeah, but that was their guy. You
No, I know.
can't lose your
Well,
guy.
it was just- no,
I mean,
that
you
was
know,
it was his brother.
he was he was his brother,
Yeah.
but he was
Yeah.
he was the guy
Oh,
getting
yeah.
it done too.
Him and P. Hamilton.
Yep.
So they actually took a basketball goal,
Net.
a net, and kind of formulated it in a couple pieces of metal, and that was kind of the first concept of the window net. Well, then grandmother takes this sewing machine. Can you see? Can you see that? All right. and that was she took pieces of
It's like some parachute material.
yeah, well, and it wasn't like the stuff they have now.
No, but it
What
was,
is that safety
just
stuff?
some thick stuff.
Like for the suits,
Yeah.
whatever.
But anyway, Daddy had laid it out, and
So she took strips,
yeah, he come up with that design.
and that was the first window net, and we'll probably have some pictures of.
Well,
some
as
different
I
ones.
said in another episode there, that Martha Jane sent that letter to us after Daddy had died, and she was discussing about them laying this thing out and fixing it, and then she took it after Grandmother sewed it. She took it down to the shoe store in Randaman, and they
because it was so thick, the
right.
material.
So they had to use the shoe sewing machines to really sew it up,
Because of
double
bigger
stitch it.
needles and whatnot,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
But it's interesting that our dad and grandmother, because of that catastrophe, invented the window net.
Right.
And what they run
And they
today.
still run them today. They just made them a little bit better.
It's very similar to the original one, which was actually their thought process was a basketball net.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then you get into back what you was talking about with the seat belts and things like that, as far as drivers goes. Like you said, they started out with just a lap belt, and a lot of drivers didn't even like that.
I guess that's Kevlar now
Yeah.
is what they use.
But back in the seat belts, I can look back in some of these old papers and things, and guys were griping then about the seat belts. They didn't want to because they was afraid they'd get stuck in the cars. 'Cause
Right.
They were more afraid of fire.
the
back
fire.
then.
Yeah.
Didn't that one episode where the recording of Daddy, he talked about him taking a dog collar and tying,
Yeah, that's
tying
when
the
they-
door shut?
Yeah, that's before they welded the doors.
I mean,
No,
so
that's right.
that even
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
deeper, but it's just
Well, it goes
it's
back
the
to-
evolution. It's just
Because they would drive the cars to the racetrack,
Right.
And then they would tape the headlights, and then they would put the dog collar or chain the door
Right.
to keep it from flying.
and
open.
then 20 years later, they come up with the window net, and then
Oh yeah.
Lord knows that the safety of them now is just
But they were
unreal.
more. I think back in those days too. I was talking. They were more afraid of fire, and so a lot of from the '60s and '70s, they really worked on fire innovations, suits. I think DuPont come out in '60s, '70 with the first fire retardant
Well,
dip suits.
Remember, somebody was telling us that they had like a tub
And they'd dip
of
them in
whatever that material was, and you had to take your suit and dip it down in there.
Yeah, it was a
and when it
fire-
come out, it was like lead,
Monsanto, I believe it was.
Yeah.
They come out with it first.
But I mean, I remember a couple guys have told that story
Yeah.
over the years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, this is the first 75, and look at the things that they've come up with. There's a whole lot more. What's the next 75 going
And
to bring?
there's probably plenty of other
There's
instances
lots more.
of
There's lots more.
of people with that kind of help
Well, sure there is.
invent the process, and we're just telling what we've seen and what we witnessed, and
Yeah, and hey, check out our online store. Got some T-shirts and stuff for sale. Like, share, and
Bob
subscribe.
Montgomery. Bob, what's the story?
Standing right alongside me is Richard's brother, Maurice. Maurice, it happened so fast, I doubt if you know what happened, but what is Richard's condition, could you tell?
Well, he's laying there talking now. Looks like his left arm. It's either sprung real bad or broke, and they're cutting his uniform away to get into him. His head's beat on, bloody, and his eyes hurt a little bit. He'll be all right, though.
But he is talking.
Yeah, he's talking. He knows everybody.
You look pretty beat yourself.
Long run.